I just keep going. What I have found in my own life is that the saying again, it's only a quitter that loses. You just keep going. And that has worked for me.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you're enjoying the show, do me a quick favor and leave us that rating and review. It helps us get that feedback we're looking for, but also helps other listeners find this podcast. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, we've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Rebecca Moore. Rebecca Moore is the co-founder and CEO of Starboard Equity and a real estate investor since 2014. Now, she syndicated the acquisition of 9 properties with over 1,100 units as a general partner and $106 million assets under management. Let's welcome to the show, Rebecca Moore.
Hi, John. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, Rebecca, I went over your bio at a very high level. Take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps.
Okay, well, let's see. We, meaning my husband and I, we started in syndication after he was getting ready to retire from the Navy. We had some single family homes that we didn't know what to do with. It's like, were we going to buy a triplex, sixplex, something like that? We really had no idea. So we went to a real estate expo and found that people were talking about syndicating larger apartment buildings. With that, we thought, wow, we can really scale up. Amazing. So we were living in San Diego at that time, as he was at the head of a squadron of ships. I was working at the Naval Hospital as a psychologist. But on the weekends, about once every other month, I would go to Dallas, where my mentor was and basically our large investment group, and I would learn about syndication and about apartment buildings, like an A class, B class, C class, learn about how to underwrite, how to get to know the lenders, brokers, and really the market out in Dallas. And so with that, I found myself a partner and was able to buy multifamily in Dallas. So that's a real quick overview of how I got started.
Yeah, and we'll dive deeper into kind of the current portfolio and how you scale. But I think it's really interesting when you talk about, being in San Diego, having kind of a portfolio of single family houses and just trying to figure out what was next, right? You mentioned your husband's retiring from the Navy and you had this portfolio. I guess, what was the trigger? I mean, I get the retirement part, but it sounds like you had these properties. Were they cash flowing? Were they not cash flowing? I mean, what was the moment you said, we should sell these and transition into something else?
You know what? That is a great question. The houses were in Virginia and Corpus Christi. And so we had a couple in Virginia and one down in Corpus Christi. And as many people know, in Corpus Christi, down on the coast, basically it had to have a lot of refreshing often because of the salt water, and the wind corrodes the house quite quickly. So we found that between each tenant that we would have to redo an awful lot to the house because, again, of the wind and the sand against the house. And so we were also paying property managers to look at all of these houses in Virginia and, again, Texas. So we were losing most of the profit that we would have gained. Now, the good thing, of course, is that we were building equity. These people were paying off the mortgage on our house, but we were not gaining much. So therefore, by learning the multifamily model, we understood that putting all of our houses, let's say, under one roof was more financially stable than having 3 separate ones where we weren't making much money.
I think that's really great insight. I appreciate you sharing that because it illustrates the challenge I think a lot of people have, right? Getting started with single family rentals makes a lot of sense for most people. But when you don't live nearby, well, now you're paying a third party to manage those properties at a minimum, a leasing agent. And this particular property in Corpus Christi was, every time you had a turnover, you had to paint, you had to, take care of and do some things on the exterior because of the wind and the salt damage for the salt water. And I think the key here is that it wasn't really cash flowing as much as maybe you thought. And my guess is when you first bought it, you probably expect to have some really nice cash flow numbers, as well as the appreciation over a longer period of time. And while that appreciation was there, the cash flow really wasn't. So with that retirement, if I'm hearing you correctly, there was probably a need to have more cash flow coming in, as opposed to just having all this equity tied up in this house. And then real multifamily is kind of what opened up the door. Is that an accurate way of thinking of that?
Yes, that is. And it wasn't necessarily so much that we needed the cash flow, but because my husband luckily had the foresight as a young man to buy these homes even before he met me, that he did have a good chunk of equity in them that we could put into multifamily. And at the time, and I'll say it, earlier than 2023, that we're able to sort of flip those apartment buildings. One every 3 years basically would sell. So we would be making a good profit that we would not have made with the single family home.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think to your point on being able to scale and see the opportunity with multifamily and syndication, that opened up the doors. You mentioned that even though you're in San Diego, you were getting out to Texas about once every other month, meeting with kind of your mentors and, kind of checking out the market and building up your connections. Talk to us about that transition into multifamily syndication. What was that experience like?
Oh, yes, it was fun and it was challenging, because it was putting myself out of my comfort zone, by being around all these people who knew about syndication and I knew nothing. Again, I was trained obviously as a psychologist, so social science, and I'm around all these folks who know about finance and these engineers, that know how to put the numbers together in their head, and I'm not so good at that. So that's where networking, at least I can be very social, and I was able to network and find my partner who was an engineer. Also, at that time, again, I was afraid to spend money. I came up in humble means, and the idea of spending, let's say, the plane ticket, the hotel, oh my gosh, that's so much money. But my husband really did help me to see the vision of this is going to pay off in the future. Whatever you do now, this education will always get you some sort of return, but also being around people that you want to be like and learning something that can set your financial future in a better place is always worth it. And it certainly ends up that it did. So getting on that plane Friday night after working all week and then coming home on a Sunday night just made me feel like, hey, Rebecca, you're doing this for your family. You're doing this for you. You're doing this for your investors someday, because at the beginning there weren't any, but that someday you're learning this because this can set a lot of people on a better path for their retirement, and including me. So, again, it was hard sometimes, it was fun sometimes, it was interesting all the time. But yeah, it definitely, you have to, no pain, no gain.
Well, what I love about what you're saying, Rebecca, is that, I can hear kind of the conflict that you were going through, right? Is like, you knew you wanted to do this, you knew there was good that would come out of it, but it was very uncomfortable. It wasn't really your background. You're around all these engineers and finance people and people who just love talking numbers and deals, and you were still fairly new, and you still went out there. You still put yourself out there in front of these people and made that investment, bought the plane tickets, got the hotel rooms, made the investment in the program. and continue to invest in your education. And what you just said about the quote from your husband, I think is brilliant. If you are investing in your education to be around people that you aspire to be like, that will always pay off. You may not get exactly what you're looking for. You may not get the deal you're looking for, or, the exact payoff. But when you're around those kind of people and you get to learn, what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it that way, you get to really build those connections and interactions. You're going to be better for yourself. And that is a strong skill to have. And I think it's really important people to understand you made that investment, even though you weren't comfortable, even though you weren't 100% gung ho, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go out there and crush this. Sounds like you probably had some concerns that I think I can do it, but it didn't sound like you knew, like, oh, I'm going to go out there and buy 1,000 units, right? You weren't like necessarily that gung ho, but you knew that there was positive that could come with it. Just talk to me about kind of balancing that duality of like, yes, you want to stay optimistic and positive, but you also have that, whether it be self-doubt or, again, as a psychologist, I'm sure you wrestle with this and can recognize these patterns in different people. So just talk about the psychology of all this.
Oh, yes, that's wonderful. So I think that my joke to myself is that I got to a PhD because I was too stupid to stop. Okay, I just keep going. What I have found in my own life is that the saying again, it's only a quitter that loses. You just keep going. And that has worked for me. And so I am astonished, that I was able to complete a PhD. So I looked at the people in my investment group and thought, well, if he could do it or she could do it, I must be able to do it because I'm not stupid, because I have a brain, I have the ambition. If they know something, they're going to help me, because that's what groups are really great about, is that we share information, and they're going to try and help me. All I have to do is what I'm told to do. And so when you think about that on an academic context, all you have to do is study for the test, take the test, pass the test. And in the same way, it's learn to underwrite, learn how to do it well, put in your LOI and see if you get the deal, is essentially kind of what we're doing. And luckily, again, as I said, my partner was an engineer. He was helping me learn how to underwrite those numbers well. He had experience already, because in multifamily, it is a team sport. And so having that person who had already done it before teach me, well, that's exactly like school. The teacher's done it before. They know the subject. Well, so did he. And he taught me, and it worked because I didn't quit. Because even though I might have felt like I didn't know what these people knew, what I did know is I could learn it.
I think that's so critical, right? Just one, the perseverance, sticking with it. You said only a quitter loses. And if you can just stick with it, good things can and typically do happen. I love that. I share a similar story where for me, it's wrestling. That was my background. I wrestled in high school, but I sucked. I mean, I was not very good my freshman year. And my youngest son wrestles now, and I tell him I actually lost every single match my freshman year. Now the record books show that I have 4 victories, but they were all by forfeit. That was just because the other team didn't have somebody in my weight class. But I lost. Somebody else stepped across from me. I lost. I finished wrestling with my name on the high school career wins leaderboard. And it's not that I was this fantastic wrestler. I just wrestled for 4 years. I showed up. I mean, you could count the number of practices I've missed on one hand, and I was consistent. And it's not so much about talent. There's a great book. Just telling someone else about this the other day, but Carol Dweck, in the growth mindset. And consistency is just so key. And if you believe that you can grow and you can develop these skills, great things happen. And for our listeners, that's the one thing I want them to listen to in your conversation is like, you may not be that person today. Maybe you can't go out there and buy whatever property today. That doesn't mean you can't educate yourself. That doesn't mean you can't surround yourself with the right partners, mentors, coaches, advisors. and people who can help you grow into the person who can go out there and do those deals. So if you can think about it with the growth mindset and invest in your education, invest the time necessary to develop these skills, to develop these talent, then you can succeed. And I think you're a living example of that. We talked about kind of the effort and the psychology of this to get started.
Mhm.
Talk to us about some of those early deals. What was that like? How did you structure them? Give me a little bit of context there.
Okay, sure. What was great is that I got my first deal in, I think, 2016, 17. And so prices were less. So I got a 94 door unit for 5 million, around the $5 million mark. It was
And
a
this is in
50.
Dallas?
Yes, it's in a suburb called Hurst, Texas. And it was great because it had a great school system. And in fact, the property was right next to a little elementary school. It had a great mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. So that's great for anybody who needs a single or a family. It was all bills paid, meaning that all of your utilities are in the rent. And so that was a niche in a way because there were not other all bills paid buildings around. So that really helps families who are not necessarily good at, paying all the different utilities, but they all want it in one chunk. So that worked out well. So it was a good property, and it was just myself and my friend Dustin, and we together were able to raise the money primarily within our investment group, because I had been in the group for two years by then. So people had learned to know, like, and trust me. And as you said, showing up like you did to your wrestling matches, I showed up. And people then began to understand, hey, maybe Rebecca is reliable because even though she's coming from out of state, she's here. And so I was able to convince them, obviously, that I can asset manage this place because I'm going to be here just about every other month. And of course, Dustin had been living in Dallas all his life, so that was great. But I was going to be the asset manager and learn the entire asset managing program, which was really interesting as well moving forward. But that is how we did it. We were able to get an agency loan because Dustin already had one on his prior deals. And yeah, able to basically get the funding through our group.
Yeah, listen, 94 units in Hurst, Texas. You got it for 5 million. Do you still own that asset, or did you exit that?
We did. We exited, I think, December 21.
Okay. All right. So you exited that. If you don't mind sharing, just because you said you got it for 5 million, what did you exit at?
About oh gosh, 10 million. It was 10 million. We
Wow.
doubled 10.
Wow.
It might
Look at
have been
that.
10.9. Yeah.
Look at it, almost double the value, in a short time frame, right? 4 or 5 year
Mm-hmm.
hold period. Excellent execution of the business plan there. Just
Mm-hmm.
demonstrates kind of the power of, real estate investing, particularly apartment investing, even if this was your first large deal. So kudos to you and congratulations on that. I
Thank
want to go
you.
to a couple of key things, right? You talked about showing up. I think that's so critical. Showing up, building relationships. You mentioned kind of the know, like, trust aspect of it. You're building these relationships by showing up, and these people saw you were serious, you were committed. And even your partner, Dustin, you saw that and you were able to form this relationship and go out there and buy this property. Talk to us about choosing the right partner. I mean, what was it about Dustin in particular? And kind of what's your process to identify the right partners moving forward?
Okay. Uh, well, I feel blessed that Dustin picked me. Although I went and presented myself to him in the very beginning, saying, please tell me, show me everything. And luckily he did. What I didn't know then that I do know now is that what I was saying, me being social scientist, him being engineer, those two strengths together help each other, because I can definitely do more of the networking and fund, and he can do more of the numbers, but together we worked very well in talking to brokers, lenders, et cetera, but also him helping me understand what the numbers mean. So he and I would talk all the time. And so again, being very reliable, showing up, call you back right away. Nobody's flaking at all. And no flaking as far as, the asset management and taking care of our investors. So we're just both very stand-up people, I would tell you. With learning from that with other partners that I've had, I have come to understand that it is best to have a very serious conversation with people you plan to partner with to see if they have the same value of, for me, the investor comes first. And I found that some people don't value that as highly as I do. And that's a serious problem for me, because for me, the investor comes first. Also making sure that the money in the deal, that the investor comes first, of course, but also that their communication that they should be putting out their monthlies every month and actually have the financials attached. It needs to be somebody that you would want to go out to dinner with and enjoy, or else it can be painful. Remember, you're going to be married to this person for at least 5 years or so. So making sure that you can see them as much as you can in all areas, even stressed out, if that's at all possible. So it's not easy in a short amount of time. So take your time, don't rush into things.
Yeah, I took some notes here, and I heard you say a couple of things that jumped out. One, looking for partners that are reliable, that are responsive, right? That don't take 5 days to respond to you. Particularly if you're talking about something critical, you want somebody who's going to be able to respond to you. Someone who's got a balanced skill set, right? So you come from more of the psychology background, they've got more of the engineering background. Those skills kind of work hand in hand together. The values, I think, are really key. And you talked about it from an investor standpoint. Are they going to put the investors first? Meaning, as they look at different decision making, are they doing everything they can to protect and preserve the capital of our investors, but also communicate with our investors so that they get the information that they need? And then last, you talked about, you said it last, but I think it's really important. It's something that we don't talk about as much. But is this a person you want to have dinner with? Can you see yourself just hanging out with this person? I would say it differently, even to say, would you go on vacation with this person, right? If you had to go somewhere and spend 3 days with this person, do you think you can make that happen without pulling your hair out? Because the reality is most people show the best version of themselves, right? Most time. And if you can find someone in a stressful situation, that's when I think you really get a sense of how they are and how they're going to be as a partner. Because if everything is good, it doesn't matter. I mean, most partners are great when everything is good. What you want to know is, hey, if we run into some big issues, do I have somebody who's going to have my back, who's going to take care of our investors, who's going to be a leader and look for solutions to the challenges that are coming up? Or am I going to find somebody who's going to blame everybody and point fingers? Just talk to me a little bit more about kind of the growth you've had in that world, because I know I've had my challenges there and had to learn some things the hard way, but I'm curious of how you've kind of learned that and kind of grown as far as your process and work with other partners.
Let me think about that. Let's see. So having to have a serious talk about things that you're not comfortable with. I know that, again, having my psychology background is very, very useful to be able to present it in a way that hopefully has a win-win. And that has been the case, but people are very interesting, and it can be unfortunate when they don't see eye to eye with you as far as your values. And so we've had to work around that as well. Warren, my husband, has been an excellent asset with that as well, in that he was a SWO, a surface warfare officer, and thus he was the captain of the ship. So he has had lots of training, being a leader, talking to his sailors. And so at times we've had to definitely put that hat back on him and have him do some sort of leadership disciplinary discussions, saying, we got to have you do X, Y, or Z. This is not okay. So unfortunately, we've had to have those kind of conversations, but they need to be a very win-win and be able to shepherd those folks as much as we can to help them hopefully see that this is the best for them, I guess. I don't have a
Yeah.
very good answer for you,
No,
John, on
but
that
well,
one.
I think the key here is that you've got to have the tough conversations, and you want to have a fair and honest dialogue that's not about pointing
Mhm.
fingers. It's about
Yeah.
there's the business and the work and what's needed, and having a conversation about that and roles and responsibilities. But there's also respect that needs to be there, and it's also trying to create a situation that gives us the best outcomes. And I think with your background and your husband's background, you're well equipped to manage and navigate that. And I think the takeaway for investors and everyone looking to get in with the deal or get in with the group, it's understanding that dynamic, like how well do they work together? How do they handle challenges and conflicts? If you're going to partner with someone, these are kind of things you want to know. It's like, hey, how should we handle issues? If you and I disagree, talk to me about that. If someone's had a bad partnership, you want to understand what happened, or not even a bad partnership, but just if you've had a previous partnership, tell me about it. What happened? Why didn't it work out? Why did it work? What'd you like? What didn't you like? But you also have to listen, right? Listen for the cues and listen to see, if this person is going to be a fit to work with for you moving forward. You mentioned, your partner earlier, and I know that you and your husband kind of run Starboard Equity. Talk to me more about kind of the evolution there and just kind of working with your husband, and what is that partnership like? 'Cause I know a lot of people either want to work with their spouse or think about working with their spouse, but they're concerned that that dynamic could be a little bit off. So just talk to me about how you manage
Okay, yeah, and it is not easy to start. So,
that.
again, when I first started learning syndication, he was in charge of a squadron out in San Diego, so he could not leave. So that's why I would always go out to Dallas. So with the first few syndications that we got, that was a lot of my doing. And then when he retired from the Navy, he was able to take a much more active role. And therefore, Starboard Equity came about. And he's great with the asset management because, again, imagine knowing a ship. He knows the plumbing, the electrical, the construction, all that kind of stuff, and as well as the leadership, helping the manager, the maintenance people, trying to create a cohesive community within our management team. So he is absolutely great at that. He is also an extremely obsessive, as I would call it in psychology, a very detailed person. So he's great at reading the legal, reading all of the documents, and doing the numbers as well. So he is definitely an asset to me for all of those things. So what we have done is we realized definitely that we would not conduct business the same. So what we have found is that I am the front office. And so I'm looking at acquisitions, I'm talking to brokers, I'm on the podcast, I am, with the investors, and he is the back office where he is looking at the legal, he's taking care of the taxes and the K-1s, and if a boiler goes down, he's at the property, stuff like that. So front office, back office, but we have had to make sure to put that boundary between our roles because we don't do business the same. So when I say obsessive, that of course, means that I'm more compulsive. So I want it done. Let's do it. Come on, let's go. Let's go. Where he is, I've got to look at every single number and every single line in that legal document, or else it
Yeah.
makes me stressed out. So that's where we are a good match, but together we can clash at times because I want to get it done now and he wants to get it done absolutely perfect.
Yeah. I think that's the challenge for so many couples is I mean, the thing that brings you together as a couple is usually the thing that can work really well in business. But for at least my wife and I starting out, it was great when we had a small portfolio. As it started to scale, it became a challenge because of that. I think some of the same things you're talking about, where when you have one person's trying to run and the other person's like, wait a minute, we have so many things we have to look into and confirm first. It becomes a challenge. And then it's a matter of the roles and responsibilities and like, are we equal partners or is there one person really driving this? And,
Mm-hmm.
does it feel like more of an employee type of conversation? So it can get a little weird there. So you have to sit back
Mm-hmm.
and just talk about it and make sure we're clear. Like, hey, we're partners on this. I value your opinion. I'm not telling you to do that, but I am saying this needs to get done. And that kind of goes back
Mm-hmm.
to our earlier conversation about roles and responsibility, because, if you're the front end, you're doing acquisitions, you're looking at the deals. If you got to get back to the broker with your feedback or an offer, but this person's, still analyzing because they're trying to track down things that are going to take 5 days to figure out, that's where some of that conflict can kind of come in. It's like, I need an answer now. Like, give me the numbers. It's good. Can we go? Can we go? And they're like, wait a minute. I'm still waiting on the environmental report. It's like, for an LOI? It's like, what are you talking about? So I can understand like how that can get really challenging when you've got someone who is kind of obsessive and really detail oriented. But as a partnership, I think it works out really well as long as that respect is there and you can work through how you're going to navigate through those situations. Talk to me
Mm-hmm.
more about kind of what you look for today. Like when Starboard Equity is looking for a deal, what's on that criteria list?
Yes. Okay. Well, we have pivoted a bit much more toward a B class than the C classes that we have previously done. Basically because the C classes are now getting quite older. C class property is typically, let's say, a 1970 and earlier. And that, again, as time goes by, is getting older. So something in a B class will have less expenses attached to it. It is still considered rather old. That could be a 1980s building. So we're looking at those now, and we are looking at 200 doors and above now, where before, of course, it's been stepping stones of, like I said, my first one was 94 units, and then we were in the hundreds, and now we're in the 200s, and one that we just acquired is 257. So we're just moving up, which is great.
Thank you for sharing the difference in the age, right? So going from C to B mainly because of the age of the building, less about the brick and whatnot, but more about the
Mm-hmm.
mechanicals and age of the systems, the amount of maintenance repairs you're gonna have to do. You said going from kind of the 100 unit up to maybe 200 units and up. What's the difference for you there as far as going from 100 units to 200 units?
That would be, of course, the fundraising. That's a huge piece. It's the ability to afford and to buy that. I think that running those types of buildings they're relatively the same. You also have to have a lot of experience, I think, though, with construction, with doing larger rehab, and knowing how the rehab works and having a good grasp of that, because it is on a grander scale.
And when you say the raise from the going up to 200, is it easier to raise on the 200 than the 100? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Nope, not at
Oh,
all.
okay. Okay. I was like, wait, I was like, okay.
No, now, as again, as the prices raise, the raise of capital for the investment is harder, and is much larger, I should say, and therefore can be a challenge. It's not my favorite part, but we do luckily get that done. So having the investor database is crucial as a syndicator.
Got it. So if I'm playing it back, then what I'm hearing you say is that because you've built the investor database over time, you have the ability to go up to larger properties. It's not so much that the raise is easier or harder necessarily. Obviously, it's going to be more work if you got more money to raise.
Mm-hmm.
But because you've built that investor database, you can now go from maybe the 100 unit complexes up to the 200, 250 plus unit complexes. Is that accurate?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the lesson for us there is like, people always ask, hey, what's your buy box? What's your criteria? And it's a great question, but what's more important is to understand why. Why is it someone's buy box? Why is it their criteria? What market are they in? Like, what advantages do they have? If you have a great asset management team or a great, construction team, you might be great with, deep value add properties. And you can do that because you got the team to come in and spend $15,000, $20,000 a unit to renovate those. If that's not your background or your great skill set, then maybe you do want to focus more on B plus type properties, where it's more of a light value add play. If you can raise $5-10 million a deal, then maybe you can go up to 200 units. But if that's not where your investor database is today, maybe you should start a little small. So the insight there is really start with where you're at right now with you and your team, and based on your skill set, based on the talents and the experiences that you and your team have. And you can always adjust as you grow your skills, as you expand, as you grow your capabilities. You can always make those adjustments. But don't worry so much about what everyone else is doing unless you're using that information to inform what you can do. With that said, we're going to go to our round of insights. But before we do that, if you want to learn more about Rebecca and her company, you can go to starboardequity.com, and we will make sure we put a link to that in our show notes. All right, first question, Rebecca. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for greater success.
Okay, well, since we're on the topic of capital raising for my second deal got a little scary toward the end. And so it really put a fire underneath me to be able to fundraise later on. So I got scared at the end and felt like I came short. But we were able to close the deal, but it made me forever a little scared. So that then helped me to get a website, get education out there to people of how multifamily works and why investing in multifamily can definitely be a great addition to your retirement.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
I like to use Neighborhood Scout, which helps look at the data around the neighborhood that you're looking at. It can also show you crime in that area. It helps me to see if it's a good area near that building that I'm looking in the market.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Well, Think and Grow Rich. I know that's by Napoleon Hill. It's a sort of not special, but it is special because it is just a great book to help us change our thinking.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
I think looking at my dream board every day that is right in front of me right now, that is, first of all, that it's updated and that I see my goals every day, that it just keeps me going, keeps that fire underneath me.
Give me your number one insight for multifamily investing.
Location, location, location. All right. It doesn't matter, if the building's shiny and new, it doesn't matter if it's old and the person is going to make it beautiful. Wherever that location is, that's the one thing that you cannot change. So make sure that you buy in a good market that has growth, good jobs, and is somewhere that people want to live.
I love it. All right, let's lighten the mood. You are in DFW and lots of options here, but give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Okay, so I did see that in your pre-questionnaire, thank goodness. And near my house is a place called Prime Farm to Table. And so everything is from the local farmers around here, and it's delicious food. The menu changes all the time.
Prime it is. Well, listen, it was great talking to you, Rebecca, and getting some of the insights. I mean, my takeaway is, you and your husband were both, a part of the military, you on the, psychology side of it, him working as a SWO. And through that process, you started, getting more into the multifamily syndication after selling some of the single family houses that you had, you know, one, just not quitting. Big takeaway is just not quitting. Stick with it,
Mhm.
get comfortable being uncomfortable. And through showing up consistently, you're going to be able to grow. You're able to do that, found a partner, started doing syndication deals, crushed that first one, buying it for 5 million, selling it for over $10 million. And as you grew, working now with your husband, you're able to scale Starboard Equity to the point where you have over $100 million in assets under management and have the systems and processes in place to kind of navigate and continue to grow. Again, for folks who want to learn more, they can check out your website, starboardequity.com. Rebecca, I just want to thank you again for coming on today and being a great guest. We look forward to staying in touch.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.